The music inside the bar was loud, and the lights moved slowly across the room. It was Friday night, and people came to forget their problems. Some laughed near the counter. Others watched the game on the big screen. Everything looked normal from the outside. But in one quiet corner, two men sat together, calm and silent. They were twins. Both tall, both strong, both dressed simply in dark jackets and jeans. They did not try to get attention. They only talked softly and watched the room. Anyone looking closely would notice something different about them. They looked relaxed, but their eyes were always aware, always observing. Their names were Marcus and Daniel. They had just returned to the city after many months away. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Just food, a drink, and some time together before leaving again. No trouble, no stress. But sometimes trouble finds people even when they do nothing wrong. At the other side of the bar, a drunk man noticed them staring in his direction. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe he was already angry. He laughed loudly and said something rude under his breath. His friends laughed too. Marcus heard it, but did not react. He took a slow sip of his drink. Daniel leaned closer and said quietly, "Ignore it." They had learned long ago that not every moment needed a response. Minutes passed, but the tension stayed in the air. The drunk man kept looking back. Soon, a bartender walked toward the twins and asked if everything was okay. Marcus smiled politely and said yes. Everything should have ended there. But 10 minutes later, the front door opened and two police officers walked in. The music felt quieter suddenly, even though it was still loud. People turned their heads. Police entering a bar late at night always changed the mood. The officers spoke briefly to the bartender. Then they looked around the room. Their eyes stopped on Marcus and Daniel. Without hesitation, they walked straight toward them. Daniel noticed first. His expression did not change. Marcus simply placed his glass on the table and sat back in his chair. The officers stopped in front of them. "We got a complaint," one officer said. His voice was firm, already suspicious. "We need you two to stand up." Some people nearby started watching closely. A few phones slowly came out. Recording began. Marcus spoke calmly. "Officer, is there a problem?" The officer's tone hardened. "We'll ask the questions. Stand up." The twins exchanged a quick look. Not fear, not anger, just understanding. They stood up slowly, keeping their hands visible. The room felt tense now. Conversation stopped. Even the bartender looked nervous. Daniel kept his voice respectful. "We're not causing trouble. We're just sitting here." But the officers already seemed convinced otherwise. One officer asked for identification. The other watched their hands carefully, as if expecting something to go wrong. The attention made the crowd uncomfortable. Some people whispered. Others kept recording. Marcus reached slowly for his wallet. Every movement was careful, controlled. Too controlled, some might say. Like someone trained never to move suddenly. The officer noticed that too. "Why are you so nervous?" he asked sharply. Marcus looked at him calmly. "I'm not nervous." And that was true. The strange thing was how calm both twins were. No arguing. No raised voices. No anger. Just patience. As if they had been in difficult situations many times before. The officer did not understand that calmness. To him, it looked suspicious. Outside, another police car pulled up. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, painting the bar walls with color. The tension grew heavier. Daniel glanced at his watch for just a second. A small movement, but Marcus noticed it. It was not fear. It was timing. Like he was waiting for something. The officer stepped closer. "You two need to cooperate, or this becomes a bigger problem." Around them, phones continued recording. People sensed something important was about to happen. Marcus nodded slowly. "We are cooperating, officer." But inside the silence, one question hung in the air. Why were they still so calm? And why did it feel like the officers were the ones who did not understand what was really happening? The night had started like any other. But it was about a change in a way no one in that bar would ever forget. The bar no longer felt like a place for fun. The music still played, but nobody was really listening anymore. Most eyes were now fixed on Marcus and Daniel. The two brothers stood quietly beside their table while the officers questioned them. Phones were still raised in the air. Some people whispered. Others watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. One officer held Marcus's ID and looked at it for a long moment. His face showed doubt, like he was trying to find something wrong. "Where are you coming from tonight?" he asked. "Dinner," Marcus replied calmly. The officer frowned. "You expect me to believe that?" Marcus did not answer right away. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes stronger than words. Daniel stood beside him, hands relaxed at his sides. His posture was straight, controlled. Anyone with military experience would have recognized it immediately. But no one in the bar noticed. To them, he was just another man being questioned, or maybe judged. The second officer walked around them slowly, studying them like they were suspects instead of customers. His voice carried across the room. "We received a call about aggressive behavior." Daniel spoke gently. "That wasn't us." The officer shrugged. "That's not what we heard." The unfairness of the moment hung heavy in the air. Some people in the crowd looked uncomfortable. A woman near the bar quietly shook her head, but said nothing. Marcus and Daniel had seen this before. Different city, different faces, same situation. Being judged before being known. Years ago, when they were younger, moments like this made them angry. Back then, Marcus used to argue. Daniel used to defend himself loudly. But life had changed them. They had learned patience the hard way. The story shifted briefly into memory. The twins growing up in a small neighborhood. Their mother teaching them one simple rule. Your strength is not in how loud you are, it is in how calm you stay. That lesson stayed with them through every challenge. Back in the present, the officer handed Marcus's ID back, but did not step away. "You two look tense," he said. "Got something to hide?" Daniel almost smiled, but stopped himself. If the officer only knew. Another police car's lights flashed through the windows. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. The bartender moved nervously behind the counter, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. Business had completely stopped. Everyone was watching the same moment unfold. Marcus spoke again, his voice steady. "Officer, we were just trying to enjoy our night." But the officer's mind was already made up. "Turn around," he ordered suddenly. "Hands behind your back." A quiet shock moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "They didn't even do anything." Daniel looked at Marcus for a brief second. It was not fear. It was communication without words. The same silent understanding they had shared since childhood. "Stay calm." Marcus slowly turned around, not resisting. Daniel followed. Their movements were slow and careful, like men trained to control every action. The officers seemed surprised by the lack of resistance. They expected anger, arguments, something dramatic. Instead, they found calm. And that calm made them even more suspicious. One officer reached for his radio, speaking quietly. The words were unclear, but his tone had changed slightly. More serious now. Daniel noticed it. His eyes moved toward the door, then back to the officer. He spoke softly. "Officer, this doesn't need to go further." The officer misunderstood the sentence as a warning. "Oh, it's already going further," he replied coldly. The tension reached a new level. Outside, more flashing lights appeared. Inside, the crowd held its breath. No one knew who Marcus and Daniel really were. No one understood why they remained so controlled, even now. But something about the situation felt wrong. Like the story everyone was watching was missing an important piece. And as the officer tightened his grip on the handcuffs, a message came through his radio. His expression changed instantly. Confusion replaced confidence. He looked again at the two calm brothers standing in front of him. For the first time that night, doubt entered his mind. Who exactly were these men? The bar felt frozen in time. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody cared about the music or the game on the screen. Every eye was fixed on Marcus and Daniel. The flashing red and blue lights outside painted the walls again and again, turning the night into something tense and uncomfortable. The officer's hand rested near the handcuffs, but he had stopped moving. The message from the radio still echoed in his mind. He looked at Marcus again, this time more carefully. The calm face, the steady breathing, the way Marcus stood without fear, without anger. It was not normal for someone in this situation. Most people argued. Most people panicked. These two didn't either. Daniel noticed the change immediately. Years of experience had trained him to read small details. A shift in posture, a change in tone, a moment of hesitation. Something had changed, but he said nothing. Across the room, a young man continued filming with his phone. The live video was already spreading online. Comments were appearing fast. People arguing without knowing the full story. Inside the bar, tension kept growing. The second officer stepped forward again, trying to regain control of the situation. "You two are making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Marcus shook his head slightly. "We're not trying to make anything hard." His voice remained calm, almost gentle. That calmness frustrated the officer. He expected resistance. Instead, he felt like he was arguing with someone who was not even fighting back. Outside, another police unit arrived. The sound of a car door closing echoed through the entrance. A senior officer walked inside, scanning the room quickly. He had seen situations like this before, small problems that turned big because nobody slowed down. "What's going on?" he asked. One of the officers explained quickly, pointing toward the twins. The story sounded simple. Complaint. Suspicious behavior. Possible disturbance. The senior officer nodded, but something did not sit right with him. He looked at Marcus and Daniel carefully. They stood straight, alert but relaxed. Not aggressive. Not afraid. Disciplined. The word came to his mind immediately. Meanwhile, Daniel's thoughts drifted for a moment. Not to fear, but to memory. Training days. Long nights. Learning how to stay calm when pressure increased. Learning that losing control could cost lives. Compared to those moments, this felt small. Still, he understood something important. Situations like this could turn dangerous very fast. The senior officer stepped closer. "Sir, can I see your ID again?" Marcus handed it over without hesitation. The officer read the name once. Then again, his eyebrows moved slightly. Confusion appeared on his face. He looked up at Marcus, then back at the ID. The room remained silent. Daniel watched carefully. He knew that look. Recognition was beginning, but not complete yet. The officer stepped aside and quietly spoke into his radio again, asking for confirmation. His voice was lower now, more careful. Seconds felt longer than minutes. The other officers noticed the change, but did not understand it. One of them crossed his arms impatiently. "Is there a problem, sir?" The senior officer did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at Marcus and Daniel once more, this time with less suspicion and more curiosity. "Where did you say you were stationed?" he asked slowly. Marcus paused for a moment, not because he was unsure, but because he knew what came next would change everything. "We didn't," Marcus said calmly. "You assumed." The answer confused the officers even more. In the crowd, whispers grew louder. People sensed something important was about to happen. The energy in the room shifted from tension to anticipation. The senior officer's radio finally responded. A voice confirmed something quietly. His expression changed completely. His posture straightened. The authority in his voice softened into respect. He stepped closer to Marcus and lowered his voice. "Sir, why didn't you say anything earlier?" Marcus gave a small, tired smile. "Because it shouldn't matter." The words hung in the air. The other officers looked confused. The crowd looked even more confused. No one understood what had just changed. But the senior officer did. And as he looked at Daniel next, realization slowly appeared on his face. The situation everyone thought they understood was not what it seemed at all. And the truth, the real truth, was only seconds away from being revealed. The silence inside the bar felt heavy. Only the soft sound of music and the quiet buzz of phones recording filled the air. Everyone could see something had changed, but no one knew exactly what. The senior officer stood still for a moment, looking at Marcus with new eyes. The confidence he had earlier was gone. Now there was caution and respect. The younger officers noticed it immediately. "Sir?" One of them asked quietly. "Is there a problem?" The senior officer did not answer right away. Instead, he handed Marcus's ID back carefully, almost respectfully. His voice was calm now. "No problem," he said. "Just a misunderstanding." The words confused everyone. A few minutes ago, the situation was close to arrests. Now suddenly, the tone had completely changed. People in the crowd looked at each other, whispering. Phones kept recording, trying to capture whatever was happening. Marcus and Daniel remained calm, just as they had been from the beginning. The senior officer cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, I'd like to speak with you for a moment." Marcus nodded. Daniel stayed beside him, silent but observant. They stepped slightly away from the crowd, but everyone was still watching. The tension had turned into curiosity. The senior officer lowered his voice. "I received confirmation from dispatch." Marcus said nothing. The officer continued, choosing his words carefully. "You're currently active duty." Marcus gave a small nod. The officer glanced at Daniel, then back at Marcus again, as if still processing the information. "And you're a Navy SEAL commander." The words were quiet, but they spread through the room like electricity. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" The younger officers froze. Their earlier confidence disappeared instantly. One of them looked embarrassed, realizing how aggressive he had been only moments before. Daniel watched silently, his expression unchanged. He had seen this reaction many times before, the sudden shift when people learned who they really were. Respect replacing judgment. But Marcus did not look proud. He only looked tired. "We didn't come here for attention," Marcus said calmly. "We just wanted a quiet night." The senior officer nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Of course." The change in tone was impossible to miss now. The same officers who had spoken sharply earlier now avoided eye contact. Across the bar, people lowered their phones slightly. The story they thought they were recording was not the story they expected. Still, one question remained. If Marcus was a SEAL commander, then who was Daniel? The senior officer seemed to be thinking the same thing. His eyes moved toward Daniel again. He hesitated before speaking. "And your brother?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm and simple. "I served too. Nothing more." But the senior officer's expression showed that he already knew the answer. Dispatch had told him enough. His posture straightened again, almost instinctively. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I understand." The younger officers looked between them, confused. They still did not fully understand what was happening, only that they had made a serious mistake. The bar manager slowly stepped forward, trying to ease the situation. "Everything okay now?" The senior officer nodded. "Yes, everything is fine." But the atmosphere had changed completely. The tension was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. People avoided looking directly at the twins, embarrassed by how quickly assumptions had been made. Marcus looked around the room for a moment. He saw the same faces that had watched silently earlier. Some looked ashamed. Others looked surprised. He did not blame them. Daniel leaned slightly toward him and spoke quietly. "You ready to leave?" Marcus nodded. But before they could move, the senior officer spoke again. His voice carried more respect now. "Sir, for what it's worth, thank you for your service." Marcus paused for a second, then replied softly, "We didn't need thanks tonight. Just fairness." The words landed heavily. The officers had no answer. As the twins prepared to leave, whispers spread through the bar. People realized they had witnessed something important, not just a reveal but a lesson. And yet, the full truth still had not been spoken aloud. Because while everyone now knew who Marcus was, very few understood just how important Daniel's role really was. And that revelation was still coming. The energy inside the bar had completely changed. Only minutes ago, the room was filled with tension and suspicion. Now, there was silence, the kind of silence that comes when people realize they may have judged too quickly. Marcus and Daniel stood near the exit, ready to leave. They did not look angry. They did not look proud. They only looked tired, like men who had experienced this moment too many times before. Behind them, the officers spoke quietly among themselves. The younger officer who had first raised his voice avoided looking in their direction. His confidence from earlier had disappeared. In its place was discomfort. The senior officer stepped forward again. His tone was careful now. "Gentlemen, I want to apologize for how this was handled." Marcus turned slightly. His expression remained calm. "We understand. Situations get tense." But Daniel noticed something else in the room. People were no longer watching with curiosity. Now they watched with respect and a little shame. The young man who had been recording lowered his phone completely. A woman near the bar shook her head softly, as if thinking about how quickly things had escalated. The truth had changed everything. But Marcus knew something important. The respect they were receiving now was not the same respect they should have received from the beginning. And that thought stayed with him. The bartender approached slowly. "Drinks are on the house," he said, trying to lighten the mood. Marcus smiled politely. "Thank you, but we're good." Daniel glanced around one last time. His eyes moved carefully, noticing small details, people whispering, officers standing straighter, the tension slowly fading away. It reminded him of missions where danger passed, leaving only silence behind. The senior officer cleared his throat again. There was still something he needed to say. Dispatch also confirmed. He began, then paused. He looked at Daniel with clear respect now. "Sir, I didn't realize you were a captain." The words spread quickly through the room. A quiet wave of surprise moved across the crowd. Some people looked shocked. Others exchanged looks of disbelief. Two brothers, both high-ranking, both calm through everything. The younger officers looked stunned. One of them quietly muttered, "We almost cuffed them." Daniel did not react to the title being spoken aloud. He simply nodded once, as if it did not matter. Because to him, it didn't. Marcus noticed the reactions around them. The sudden change, the sudden respect, and he felt the same uncomfortable truth again. Nothing about them had changed. Only what people knew had changed. A man from another table slowly walked closer. He looked nervous. "Hey, I just want to say, I am sorry. I thought." He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. Marcus gave a small nod. "It's okay." The man stepped back, clearly relieved but also thoughtful. The moment became quiet again. No anger, no shouting, just reflection. The senior officer spoke once more, this time honestly. "You both handled this better than most people would have." Daniel answered simply, "We've had practice." The answer carried more meaning than most people understood. Years of discipline, years of pressure, years of learning when to act and when not to. Outside, the flashing lights finally disappeared as the extra police units left. The night slowly began returning to normal, but the mood inside the bar would not return so easily. People had seen something uncomfortable. How quickly assumptions could turn into confrontation. How calm strength could change a situation without force. Marcus picked up his jacket. "Let's go," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. As they walked toward the door, people moved slightly out of their way. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The same room that had once watched them with suspicion now watched them leave in silence. But before stepping outside, Marcus paused for a moment. He turned back toward the officers. "We didn't say who we were," he said calmly, "because it shouldn't take a title for people to be treated right." No one argued. No one could. The door closed behind the twins, and the cold night air replaced the heavy atmosphere inside. The story in the bar was over. But for many people inside, the lesson had only just begun. The night air outside felt quiet after the noise of the bar. Marcus and Daniel walked side by side down the street. The flashing lights were gone now. The sound of music faded behind them as the door closed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city looked peaceful, but both men knew the night would stay in people's minds for a long time. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Same story, different place." Marcus gave a small smile. Yeah, they had lived through moments like this before. Not always with police. Sometimes in airports. Sometimes in restaurants. People making decisions before knowing anything about them. It no longer surprised them, but still disappointed them. Inside the bar, conversations slowly started again. The tension had passed, but the atmosphere felt different now. People spoke more quietly, thinking about what they had just seen. The young officer who had first confronted the twins stood near the counter, replaying the moment in his mind. He remembered his tone, his assumptions, the way he had already decided who they were before asking questions. The senior officer stood beside him. "You see what happened tonight?" he asked calmly. The younger officer nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." It wasn't about rank, the senior officer continued. It was about judgment. The word stayed with him. Across the room, the man who had made the original complaint sat silently, staring at his drink. Earlier, he had felt confident. Now he looked uncomfortable, embarrassed. He realized something simple but difficult. Nothing the twins had done justified what happened. Outside, Marcus and Daniel reached the end of the street. A streetlight above them cast long shadows on the pavement. Daniel looked at his brother. You ever think about saying it earlier? Who we are? Marcus shook his head. No. Daniel understood why. If they had spoken earlier, everything would have changed instantly. The tone, the respect, the outcome. But that was exactly the problem. Respect should not depend on titles. They had learned that lesson long ago during training. In the military, rank mattered for order, but character mattered more. Marcus stopped walking for a moment. Cars passed quietly in the distance. You know what bothers me? He said. Daniel waited. They didn't see us differently because we changed, Marcus said. They saw us differently because they learned something new. Daniel nodded slowly. He had thought the same thing. Back in the bar, the video recorded earlier was already spreading online. People argued in the comments. Some defended the officers. Others criticized them. But many focused on one thing: how calm the twins had remained. The video showed no shouting, no resistance, only patience. And that made people think. The senior officer watched part of the video on someone's phone. He sighed quietly. He knew the situation could have ended much worse. One wrong move, one moment of anger, and the story would be very different. Instead, the twins chose control. That choice changed everything. Outside, Marcus and Daniel reached their car. Daniel leaned against the door for a moment, looking up at the night sky. You think they learned anything? He asked. Marcus opened the car door, then paused. Some of them did, he said. That's enough. The message of the night was not about heroes or ranks. It was about something simpler. How easy it is to assume. How hard it is to stay calm when treated unfairly. And how true strength sometimes means walking away instead of proving a point. Back inside the bar, the younger officer finally approached the bartender. His voice was quieter now. I think we could have handled that better, he admitted. The bartender nodded. Yeah, you could have. There was no anger in the answer, only honesty. The night slowly returned to normal, but the lesson remained. Because everyone who witnessed the moment understood something now. The twins were not impressive because of their titles. They were impressive because they never needed those titles to stay strong. And as Marcus and Daniel drove away into the quiet city, they left behind more than just a story. They left behind a reminder. Respect should come before recognition, not after it. The next morning, the city woke up like any other day. Cars filled the streets. Coffee shops opened. People rushed to work. But online, one video continued to spread. The clip from the bar had already reached thousands of views overnight. The title people shared was simple. Two men stay calm while being wrongly accused. Many who watched did not know the full story at first. They only saw two calm brothers surrounded by tension, refusing to argue, refusing to lose control. That alone made people stop and watch until the end. Comments filled the screen. Some people argued about what the police should have done. Others talked about bias and judgment. But many focused on something else, the way Marcus and Daniel handled the situation. They stayed calm when it would have been easy to get angry. They stayed respectful when respect was not given first. And that stayed with people. Inside the bar, the night was still being discussed. The bartender told the story to new customers. The young officer returned before his shift started, sitting quietly at the counter. He looked different now, more thoughtful. The senior officer joined him again. You keep thinking about it? He asked. The younger officer nodded. Yeah, I keep asking myself why they didn't get angry. The senior officer gave a small smile. Because they didn't need to. The answer was simple, but it meant a lot. Across the city, Marcus and Daniel were already preparing to leave. Their time there was short, just like always. Bags packed. Plans ready. No attention, no interviews, no public statements. They never wanted the spotlight. Daniel checked his phone briefly. Messages from old friends, teammates, and even strangers filled the screen. Some thanked them. Others said the video changed how they saw things. He locked the phone and put it away. Marcus noticed. You reading the comments? Daniel shook his head. No point. Marcus smiled slightly. They both knew the truth. The lesson was not meant to make them famous. It was meant to make people think. As they drove through the quiet morning streets, the city looked peaceful again. Nothing showed what had happened the night before. No signs. No reminders. But lessons do not need signs to exist. Back at the bar, the man who had made the original complaint returned as well. He stood near the door for a long time before finally walking inside. He looked uncomfortable, unsure why he came back. Maybe he wanted to understand what bothered him so much. He realized it was not fear or anger. It was regret. He had made a decision about someone without knowing them, and now he could not change that moment. The bartender simply nodded at him. No judgment, just quiet understanding. Sometimes the biggest lessons come from uncomfortable moments. Outside the city, Marcus and Daniel stopped at a gas station before heading out. The morning sun was rising, painting the sky orange and gold. Daniel looked at his brother. You think anyone will remember this in a month? Marcus thought for a moment before answering. Maybe not the details, he said, but they'll remember how it felt. And that was enough, because the story was never really about two military officers in a bar. It was about something bigger. It was about how quickly people judge, how easily situations can escalate, and how powerful calm strength can be in changing the outcome. As their car disappeared down the highway, life moved on for everyone else. The bar filled again that night. New music played. New conversations began. But for those who were there, something had changed. They had seen that respect should not depend on uniforms, titles, or status. It should begin with simple humanity. And long after the video stopped trending, one message remained clear in the minds of those who watched it. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who never need to prove who they are.